There are things in this world that should be left untouched. If we'd only been a foot away, we might have never discovered it. That was the first thing out of 25-year-old Rand Davenport's mouth while being interviewed by investigative journalist Adam Andrews in 2004. In Rand's words, these are the events that took place during the early summer of 1992. Moving to a completely different state in the fall of 91 because my father had bought a farm in Broken Bow, Nebraska, was one of the hardest things for me to deal with up to that point. I grew up in Arizona, so leaving my friends behind crushed me. The first few months of school I kept to myself. No one bothered or talked to me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It wasn't until January of 92 I became friends with Paul Alexander and Shane Harden. I'll never forget, I was sitting in class listening to Paul go on about how cool he thought he was, when for some reason I scoffed out loud at him. This pissed him off as he got up, came back to my desk, and slugged me in the arm. I laughed, which of course set him off, making him even more angry. Several periods later, we were at gym class and he came at me again. I wasn't about to back down, so we went at it pretty good, as the rest of the class formed a circle, cheering us on. When the fight was over, neither of us had won, except respect for each other. From that day on, we became the best of friends. Paul was already good friends with Shane, so we quickly became an inseparable trio. It's hard to describe how good it felt to have friends again. It wasn't long after that I started accepting the move and actually started being somewhat happy again. We didn't do much outside during those first few months, being it was winter, mostly staying inside playing video games. When the snow melted in mid-April though, we wasted no time in venturing out as much as we could. The farm my father bought had a large hollow about a half-mile away with lots of trees and a nice stream running through it, so naturally we made that our daily spot to hang out. The first week there was spent building a makeshift cabin, if you could call it that, out of fallen trees and branches. We even brought supplies in our sleeping bags so we could spend the night there sometimes. Sitting around the fire those nights, laughing with them, will always be some of my fondest memories. Everything was great for the first month or so, until we stumbled upon it. I'm not sure the exact day, but I'm certain it was the first week of June. By then we'd explored most of the hollow except for one area, the part furthest away from our makeshift cabin. We got there early that morning, as it was the perfect day, warm and not a cloud to be seen. As we sat in the cabin throwing around ideas of what to do, we decided to check out this particular area. Anytime we'd venture to new areas, we'd usually find old trinkets or tools left from people before, so exploring was always at the top of our list. As we followed the stream down to this new area, we kept a close eye on the water, as we usually see brook trout and loved catching then cooking them over a fire. For some reason, we didn't see any that day. About an hour later, we rounded a small hill and were somewhat taken aback to see tucked away in some trees an old broken down shack. We'd found old fences and such before, but nothing like this. We were pleasantly surprised though as we ran over to it hoping we'd find some cool things inside. When I stepped inside, a musty, dank smell hit me, almost making me pull up my shirt to cover my nose. "Damn, what is that smell?" asked Shane. "Whatever it is, it ain't pleasant," chuckled Paul. "Probably just old wood rot," I replied. At first glance, we could see a rotting mattress on the floor, which looked like rodents had been using to make nests. There was also a black iron stove with a pipe going through the roof that still had a pot and kettle on it. Scattered on the ground were various things: broken plates, torn clothing, a lantern, but one item that caught my attention was a big brown Bible. It was flipped open, sprawled out on the floor. The weird thing was, it looked to be in pristine condition. There was no dust on it, and the pages looked brand new. How could that be, with everything else looking like it was 100 years old, I thought. My next thought was, shit, someone still lives here, as I spun around worried someone might show up at any second. There's no way, though, with the condition this shack is in, I mumbled to myself, feeling a sense of relief. Maybe it's just one of those things, I thought as I reached down, picking it up. Looking at the front and the back, the entire thing appeared to be in great condition. Better than you'd expect it to be. I mean, who knows how long it had been there. I kick myself now for not paying attention to which pages it was open to. Maybe, just maybe, it was a warning for what was about to happen. Or maybe those specific pages were meant to be opened like they were, to prevent it. I'll never know, but will always wonder. I tucked the book under my arm as I continued searching the shack for anything that piqued my interest. A while later, as we stepped out, our arms loaded with stuff, Shane said, "Hey, let's look around here to see if we missed anything." After searching around for a few minutes, Paul, who was several yards away from Shane and I, blurted out, "What's this? There's something hard in the ground. Come check this out." He was scraping some dead weeds away with his foot as I walked over. I watched as the weeds gave way to a smooth, black, rectangular piece of stone. It looked almost like a gravestone, but nothing was engraved on it. "Wow, what is this thing?" asked Paul as he dropped the stuff he was holding. He then picked up a pot, ran down to the stream, filling it up with water. As he poured it over the stone, clearing off the remaining dirt, revealed how shiny it actually was. It was a brilliant black color, unlike any rock or stone I'd ever seen. He dropped the pot as he knelt down, looking back at us with a smirk. "I wonder if someone is buried here," he said. He reached down, putting his hand on it, which froze him in place as his head flung back. "Paul, you all right?" asked Shane. Without thinking, I went over and grabbed his shoulder. The next thing I remember was opening my eyes, seeing them both next to me, kneeling down with our hands on what we later nicknamed the Raven, due to its color. I was the first one to take my hands off as I looked at my friends, who appeared to be in some sort of a trance. "Hey guys," I blurted out, grabbing their shoulders, shaking them. Whatever it was, they quickly snapped out of it. "Dude, what was that?" asked Paul. "I don't know. It was like I was taken somewhere else. It was dark and I was standing in Broken Bow Cemetery," replied Shane. "Me too, man." "What the hell?" responded Paul. "Bullshit, that's crazy. What are you guys talking about? 1 second my hand was on your shoulder, then I opened my eyes and my hands were on this thing. Whatever this thing is," I said as I glared at Paul. "Listen, man, I'm not lying," replied Paul, somewhat agitated. "Yeah, what are the odds I saw the same exact thing?" asked Shane. I stood up, wanting to get out of there as they intently stared at it. "Come on, guys, let's go," I said as I picked up the stuff from the shack and started heading back. I'd only gone about 30 yards before turning around to see them still kneeling down, their eyes fixated on the Raven. "Guys, seriously, move your asses," I hollered at them. Only then did they stand up, grab their stuff, and start coming. "We absolutely have to come back here tomorrow," said Shane excitedly. "Hell yes, we're definitely coming back tomorrow," replied Paul. I said nothing, just shook my head, knowing I wouldn't be able to change their minds. On the way back, all they could talk about was the damn Raven and how they were already longing to go back. I forget which one of them named it that, but they talked about it like it was an old, long-lost friend. They were acting strange, and I wondered why I didn't feel the same, even though I'd put my hands on it. That night at dinner, I was more quiet than usual. I couldn't shake this odd feeling, like something that shouldn't be was inside me. My mother noticed, asking me what was wrong, but like always, I replied, "Nothing." They showed up at my house earlier than usual the next morning. Right off the bat, I could see they were antsy to go back. Again, like the day before, it was all they talked about. The closer we got, the more excited they became. I felt it too, but not to the extent they did. As it came into sight, they wasted no time running and putting their hands on it. I hesitated, but the idea of feeling what they felt overtook me, so I joined them. In the split second after my hands touched it, I was suddenly looking up at the stars, from what looked to be a big, deep rectangular hole. Once I realized I was laying in a coffin, I immediately sat up and started panicking. "Paul, Shane, where are you guys?" I shouted as loud as I could. It then hit me. Since I was in a coffin, there should be a body. I jumped up and looked down, expecting to see the remains of someone, but there was nothing. "Rand, where you at, man?" shouted Paul. "I'm down here, standing in a coffin. Get me out of here," I yelled back. I then heard noise above me as I looked up to see them standing there with bewildered looks on their faces. Shane then let me his hand, helping me out of the hole. "What the hell is going on, boys? Why are we here? How did we even get here?" I asked as I tried putting on a brave face but was scared out of my mind. "No idea, man. The last thing I remember was touching the Raven, then we woke up here," replied Shane. "I remember bits and pieces, but there's no way it can be real," Paul quietly mumbled. What I want to know is where are the bodies that belong in these coffins? I asked. Unfortunately, that's the part I remember. I think we got inside so we could absorb the dead bodies into us, Paul replied. No way, Shane said loudly. Where the hell are they then? I was at the funeral of the person's grave I climbed out of, responded Paul in a tone of disbelief. As I stood there not believing this was actually happening, a sense of euphoria overcame me. It was like nothing I'd ever felt, and I could clearly see they were feeling it also. Before leaving, we shoveled the dirt back into the graves as best we could, knowing what would happen if we got caught. None of us said anything on the walk back home, as a sense of euphoria we were feeling was like flying. It felt so good. It was past midnight when I walked inside my house, and boy, did my parents give me an earful, almost grounding me the rest of the week, but for some reason they didn't. Now, I almost wish they'd had. That night, I had the worst dream of my life. I was laying in a coffin next to a body. Its eyes suddenly opened as it came to life. It then wrapped its arms around me so I couldn't move, put its head next to mine, absorbing me into it as I shrieked out in pain. This jolted me awake as I stood there not believing where I was. About 10 feet away was my parents' bed, both of them sound asleep. What's happening to me? I whispered to myself as I turned and went back to bed. The following morning, my friends arrived early again. I have to admit, I was torn. A big part of me wanted to feel the euphoria again, but a small part of me knew if we continued, something very bad was going to happen. The desire to feel it again was stronger, though, as I didn't hesitate long before leaving with them. Exhilaration surged through us as we ran the entire way there. I vividly remember the disturbing smiles on their faces, which I'm sure was on mine too, and just like before, no sooner had we placed our hands on it, we woke up in coffins, the bodies gone. This time, the euphoria was much stronger and lasted longer, making us crave it even more. So every day over the next week, we visited the Raven. I'm not sure how many times we did this or when the feeling started to fade, but it was around the time people in town figured out someone had been messing with the graves. There was talk of digging them up to check, but a decision was made not to. Even though we were like addicts needing their drugs, we decided to take a break for fear of being caught. I remember my parents discussing it at dinner and were shocked something like this was actually going on in a small town. That night, I had another disturbing dream, only this time I was laying next to my father. His eyes opened in horror as I wrapped my arms around his neck, absorbing him as he screamed out, pleading with me to let go. When I came to, I was closer to their bed this time. This happened every night over the next several days, and each night I would get closer and closer. The following morning, I met up with my friends at Shane's house and told them about my dream and how I was getting closer to my parents' bed each time. I wasn't surprised when they said the same exact thing was happening to them. What happens when we make it all the way? I asked. Who knows and who cares? It's just a dream, replied Shane, acting like he was annoyed. A dream we're all sharing, and not to mention the crazy shit that's been happening to us since we found that thing. You can't just dismiss it, man, I responded. We can, and we will, said Paul. Go then, I'm never going back to that cursed thing ever again, I angrily responded. Dude, that's just fine with us, but we're going back tomorrow, Shane said with a smirk. That was the moment a shift took place in my mind. I thought about telling my parents, but it all sounded crazy and unbelievable, and wasn't sure how they'd react. That, and I felt like I'd be betraying my friends. I left Shane's house and went home shortly after that, stewing about our conversation for most of the day. I had an unsettling idea of what was going to happen if they went again. Even though I was scared, I made a plan that night to follow them the next day to see if what I thought was true or not. I got up really early the following morning so I could beat them there. I knew the perfect spot to hide so I could watch everything unfold. Everything was quiet and peaceful except for my mind as I walked along the stream that morning. The craziest thoughts were going through my head, and the closer I got, the more scared I became. I was relieved when the shack came into sight and they weren't there yet. I hurriedly ran over to my hiding spot, which was a large, fallen down tree about 50 yards away. I lay there for a while, peering through a small opening before I heard them laughing. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but did hear my name a few times. They wasted no time going over and putting their hands on it. I watched as their heads flung back, their eyes rolled, leaving only the whites exposed. Laying there, waiting for something to happen, was the longest day of my life. Any second, I expected them to stand up and leave, but they remained in that position almost the entire day, until dusk settled in. Shane was the first one to stand up and leave as Paul remained, not moving. This caught me off guard as I quickly debated what to do. I decided to follow Shane in case what I thought was going to happen actually happened. I kept him in sight but stayed back far enough he wouldn't notice. The way he was behaving led me to believe he was definitely not himself. He never turned around and seemed dead set on something. He also walked unusually slow, so it took a long time before his house came into sight, which was already dark, so I'd guessed everyone inside was most likely asleep. When he got there, he went around the back of the home. I waited until he was out of sight before running as fast as I could to cut the distance. As I peered around the corner, he was already gone. I knew I had to be quick, so I ran up to the screen door, cracking it slightly so I could listen. I heard his faint footsteps as he climbed the stairs. I waited until he reached the top and rounded the corner before I slowly opened the door the rest of the way. I hurried and took my shoes off so I'd be able to move swiftly and quietly. I bolted up the stairs as fast as I could, trying not to make a sound. I, of course, knew the layout of the house and went to his parents' bedroom first. As I entered their room, I could see Shane lifting up the blanket, about to climb into their bed when I shouted out, "No, Shane!" He didn't stop, so I pulled out my father's pistol I'd brought, aimed for his head as I whispered, "I'm sorry," then squeezed the trigger. He fell to the floor as his parents went hysterical. Paul's face flashed through my mind, and knowing he was still out there brought me back to reality. I then ran out of the house, heading towards his place. As his home came into sight, I could see he was about to open the front door as I yelled out, "Paul, stop!" It didn't faze him one bit as he continued stepping inside. I then got within a few feet of him, raised the pistol, and closed my eyes as I pulled the trigger. A loud boom filled the somber summer night air as my ears began ringing something awful. The pistol fell to the ground as I crumbled to my knees and started sobbing. I remained in that position until the police arrived. Telling their parents the truth of what happened was gut-wrenching, knowing they wouldn't believe a word of it. And they didn't. Nobody did. I miss my friends dearly, and maybe there was another way, but I was young and stupid. Of course, I was labeled crazy, and here I am, locked away in this hospital till the day I die, which I fully accepted I deserve. Police dug up the graves in the cemetery that had been disturbed and did in fact find a total of 21 bodies missing. They also checked out the shack and found what Rand called the Raven. Out of respect for the deceased, the shack was torn down, and the black stone, the Raven, was removed from the ground and put somewhere for safekeeping. Rand was allowed to take the Bible he found in the shack to the hospital. He said he reads it every day, searching for the pages it was open to when he found it. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.